सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The story of the week by a long distance has been the great flood of Delhi. You've been seeing visuals, you've been reading stories, watching stories. It's been a terrible, terrible situation in Delhi, particularly for some parts of Delhi, that is in the northeast Delhi, areas abutting the Yamuna river. They've suffered a terrible flood. You've seen cars completely drowned. You've seen houses with maybe 1 floor or 1.5 floor completely underwater. It's been terrible for the areas that got hit by flood. Also, some areas which have never been hit by floods in Delhi, even in the past when floods were routine in Delhi, like Mathura Road, for example, parts of Ring Road, near where the WHO office is. These are areas that form sort of the other side, the flank of the island or the enclave where the Supreme Court, Delhi High Court, etc. are located. Now, these areas got flooded and you saw these terrible visuals. Now, what happens when such a thing happens? Immediately, people rush to immediate conclusions. So, conclusions that you saw usually depended, the same old Rashomon principle, usually depended on where people were coming from, what their predilections were, or what in Hindi we would call purvagrah. So whoever had whatever beliefs or whatever presumptions, they jumped with that. Some said that's because development has been allowed in Yamuna's floodplains. Why did Akshardham temple come up, for example, right? Or why did some other colonies come up? Good points. Some said, oh, this is nothing but rampant encroachment by slum dwellers, others, etc., etc. But again, the question is, if they encroached, they got flooded, they moved out, they were the worst sufferers, they did not cause the flood to happen, but those are arguments. Then, the biggest of them all, climate change, that this is climate change, right? So what do? It's climate change, so do you then shut down your coal-fired power plants tomorrow? Even if you did that, nothing will change. So, all of these factors matter. All of these factors made a difference and they added to the catastrophic situation that happened for one part of Delhi for almost a week, right? But the basic reason, the main reason why Delhi got flooded like this, and these parts of Delhi got flooded like this while almost everything else in Delhi remained all right. There's usual seasonal waterlogging in some streets, etc. But that is routine. In fact, the first heavy rains of winter also lead to waterlogging in many of those areas because our drainage, our sewerage, etc. are so badly maintained. So first rains cause waterlogging. So those areas didn't get flooded. Some areas got flooded. So what is the reason? Now, sometimes, as we keep saying, sometimes you have to take a deep breath and look at less dramatic causes for how things go wrong. Or, as we say quite often, that don't search for a conspiracy for what can be easily explained as an error, as stupidity, as laziness, as incompetence, as political insensitivity, or maybe a combination of all of these. On top of this, you have the nature's wrath. So all of it gets together, the nature's wrath mixed with all these other factors, and then you have the kind of disasters that Delhi has seen over the past week. Now, what is it that represents the 4 or 5 things that I said? That is incompetence, political insensitivity, carelessness, laziness, whatever you want to call it, stupidity you want to call it, you can call it, your choice, right? I'm not calling it that. But here is what happened. Among the many things that happened, it's true that Delhi got very heavy rain. It isn't just Delhi, but all of Haryana, Punjab, Himachal Pradesh and Haryana are the catchment areas of the Yamuna River. Yamuna River, before it enters Delhi, it traverses through Himachal Pradesh, nearly 200 kilometers, and then also again it traverses through Haryana, again about 200 kilometers. I'm not giving you precise lengths. So through those catchment areas also, the river was abetted by zones that saw very heavy rain. Now, how much of rain that was, I will give you the figure for Delhi. Delhi, for example, between June 1 and July 17 this year, got 291.6 millimeters of rain, right? Normal for this period, that is, the period includes about 3 weeks of regular monsoon season. The normal for this period is 163.1 millimeters. So Delhi's rainfall was 79% excess. And it wasn't just Delhi in isolation. It's not as if a cloudburst took place over Delhi. This applied to the entire northern region, Himalayan and sub-Himalayan region. That's why you found these visuals of flooding in Punjab, extensive flooding in Punjab, Haryana as well, and Himachal. So all of that water ultimately comes down in the rivers. And that water for this large catchment area, Yamuna's catchment area, obviously was drained by the Yamuna river. That water came down, it was too much to manage. If you see upstream of Yamuna river, see this visual, see this graphic. If you see upstream of Yamuna river emerges in Uttarakhand at an altitude of about 14,500 feet at a place called Bandarpunj. So it comes down from there and then carries on for 1,376 kilometers until it meets the Ganges. It has the confluence or Sangam with the Ganges, with Ganga, in Allahabad or Prayagraj. That is 1,376 kilometers. Yamuna actually is a very underrated river. We always think of Ganga as the big river and Yamuna as a mere tributary. It isn't just a mere tributary. Yamuna, as I told you, is 1,376 kilometers. And if you talk about the Ganga-Jamuna basin, then this accounts for 40%. In fact, a little over, fractionally over 40% of that basin. So it is a very, very large river, and a lot of its water to begin with comes from the Himalayas. Now, until the river reaches Delhi, in fact, even after it leaves Delhi, there is no real dam over the river. There is no real dam that stores a lot of water from the river. Now, why that has happened, I don't know, but that is the history. What the river has, on the other hand, is barrages. Just as the river reaches the foothills of Uttarakhand, there is the first barrage, that is the Dak Patthar barrage. From that barrage, the first wing of the eastern Yamuna canal is taken out. That eastern Yamuna canal then comes down and meets the Yamuna again near a place called Hatnikund in Haryana, near the city of Yamunanagar, where the second barrage is, and this is a much bigger barrage from which this eastern Yamuna canal gets more water. Similarly, at Hatnikund, which is the second barrage and the bigger barrage, another canal is taken out on the western side, that is towards the Haryana side. That is the western Yamuna canal. So water is then also diverted from Hatnikund into western Yamuna canal. And these two canals then feed large parts of western UP and then Haryana, and also gives drinking water to Delhi. In fact, the western Yamuna canal goes right through all of Haryana. It feeds Haryana, it gives them drinking water, it gives them irrigation water. Haryana, as we know, is a green revolution zone. It has heavy irrigation requirements, particularly as it grows a lot of rice and sugarcane. And that canal then comes back and meets the Yamuna near Delhi, in fact, in the territory of Delhi, at what is called as the Haidarpur water treatment plant. And that water is then processed for Delhi's drinking water needs. So this is a very vital river. Now what happens is, when so much more water comes in this river, usually these barrages are made to regulate the flow of water. These barrages were not made to store water. But when so much water comes, these barrages have no option but to open up the gates and let the water flow, because the barrages don't have the strength to withstand this kind of a flow of water. A Delhi government says that Haryana government should have diverted this water into the two canals, into the eastern Yamuna canal and the western Yamuna canal, instead of letting it all come towards Delhi. And because they let it all come towards Delhi, too much of water came in and we simply were left with no defenses. Now the fact is that too much of water did actually come in. So 1 lakh cusecs of water was released for 3 full days. Now what is cusecs. For simplicity of understanding, a cusec or a cubic feet per second. Cubic foot is exactly 28.317 liters. I am now going full metric. If you see a normal large bucket of water, that's 14 liters. So 1 cubic foot would be around 2 full buckets of water. 1 lakh cubic foot would be 2 lakh full buckets of water. So when you say that the Hatnikund barrage released 1 lakh cubic feet of water, that is like the barrage was releasing 2 lakh full buckets of water every second. 2 lakh full buckets of water every second for 3 days. And that water then traveled down to Delhi and onwards. When that water came to Delhi, it was too much water. Now, Haryana government says that, look, you Delhiwalas are saying, Kejriwal government is saying that we release this water, we should have let it go to the canals. But the guidelines of the Central Water Commission are that when the flow in the Yamuna river goes beyond a point, 1 lakh is an absolutely not just the upper limit, but way beyond that. When the flow becomes that heavy, you cannot keep the gates closed and divert the water into the canals because water flowing with that momentum, that much water coming in at that speed and in those volumes also carries a lot of boulders, it carries tree trunks, because that water sweeps everything that comes in its way in the mountains, and those can go and strike the gates, sluice gates in your barrage and break them, and that would lead to a real catastrophe. In fact, if you would remember, and we'll try and find some of those visuals for you. If you look at visuals of the Great Pakistan flood that took place in August and September of 2022, a lot of the damage was caused just by these boulders and these tree trunks or uprooted trees floating with the rivers in rage, taking down barrages, taking down sluice gates, taking down bridges, etc. And as they take more debris, they become more destructive. So Delhi government says Haryana government released too much water. Haryana government says Delhi government should have known that we can't direct this water anywhere else. And then we come to the next complexity. And the next complexity is the reason I talk about laziness, incompetence, political insensitivity, etc., etc. Who is to blame? That you can figure out, voters will figure out, or maybe as more facts come out, those will be figured out. Now, if you look at the city of Delhi, Yamuna passes out of 1376 kilometers of its length, Yamuna passes Delhi for all of 22 kilometers. That's all. From the moment it enters Delhi to when it leaves. So, in fact, if you look at the whole length of the Yamuna, it's not even 2% of it falls in Delhi. Much less than 2% of it falls in Delhi. Yet, I mean, I'm adding in a factoid from here. Yet, 80% of the impurities, of the pollution that the Yamuna carries in Delhi and onwards from Delhi is added in Delhi, because all of Delhi's sewage, like sewage, garbage, only a fraction of Delhi's sewage is treated. A lot of that is just emptied into the Yamuna, and Yamuna then becomes a sewage canal. So, this Yamuna in Delhi has 3 barrages. The first barrage is the Wazirabad barrage. That comes in shortly after the rivers enter Delhi. Wazirabad barrage is controlled by the Delhi government. Wazirabad barrage then regulates the flow of water onwards. Then it comes to what is called as the ITO barrage. ITO barrage is ITO stands for Income Tax Office in Delhi for non-Delhi walas, and that abuts Ring Road, and that abuts the areas where the big unusual flooding took place, the Mathura Road area, WHO office, the court complexes, etc., etc. That is where the water came in. Rajghat also got affected by that. It's not far from there. Red Fort, etc. Now, that ITO barrage is the second barrage. That then regulates the flow of water, and then comes the third barrage. That is the Okhla barrage. So, there are 3 barrages in Delhi in a 22-kilometer length. In fact, if you see the length from the first barrage to the last one, it's not even 22 kilometers. It's even less than that, right? But the interesting thing is, the question that you might want to ask me is, I would like to ask you is, who do you think is responsible for the upkeep and maintenance and the management of these barrages? You will say, obviously, the Delhi government. And if you say so, I'll say, ha ha ha, because the joke is on us. Joke is on us. Dilliwalas and citizens by and large, because all of the citizens of India have been embarrassed to see their capital city flooded like this. The capital city of India, which is built along a famous river, a very powerful river, a nearly 1400 kilometer long river, massive river. It has 3 barrages. Each one is run by a different state government. So the first barrage, Wazirabad barrage, is run by the Delhi government. The third barrage, the Okhla barrage, is run by the UP government, and I will explain to you why. And the middle barrage, which is where the big problem arose, the ITO barrage, is run, believe it or not, by Haryana government. That is the barrage where 5 of the 32 sluice gates were jammed. They were so jammed, these could not be lifted to let the water go. Because these could not be lifted, they were jammed, they were rusted, they had too much silt, they had too much weeds around them, maybe debris stuck underneath them and around them. They could simply not be lifted. And because these could not be lifted, water could not go out, and that's why the water backed up. The water backed up, and that was one of the causes why water went over the edges, particularly in that Mathura Road to Rajghat stretch, which became the most abiding visual of this. Rajghat underwater, Red Fort underwater, etc. So you might say climate change caused this big heavy downpour. Possibly it did, but a lot of the disaster that Delhi saw was human-made. Now to try and understand this situation, imagine that in your home, in my home, I'm not wishing it on your home, in any of our homes, suppose there is a bathroom which we haven't used for a long time. The bathroom plumbing lies clogged. The bathroom drain lies clogged. We haven't bothered to check it for a long time. Maybe it's a bathroom for our guest room. We haven't had guests for a long time, so we haven't checked this out, right? One day, somebody goes to wash their hands or something, leaves the tap open in the same bathroom, and then goes away from home for a couple of days. It so happens that that day particularly, the water supply in your city decides to give you extra water. So you have 24 hours running water at very high pressure. What will happen? Unless somebody comes back quickly and switches off, turns off the tap, and also plumbs that blocked drainage pipe, water will back up and flood your entire home. This may just be a problem starting with one spare bathroom in your home, but if you don't pay attention to it, maybe you come back 2 days later, all your home would get flooded and ruined. That is precisely what happened in Delhi. So once again, look at these 5 gates, look at all this water coming. So whoever is giving you water supply has decided to give you thrice as much water as you might have got in 124-hour period, right? Your drainage pipe is clogged, and so all the water is backed up. Then what happens? You call the plumber or you do it yourself. You clean that drainage pipe, and then all the water goes away. So what happened in Delhi? The army was called out. So first the army engineers were called out, and they found that the gates of that barrage were rusted. They were deeply rusted, and you will see some pictures that my colleague Praveen Jain, our photo editor, and his team member Suraj Singh Bisht, he's got these pictures. See these pictures. See how rusted these gates are. So the army came and they found these gates. They were so rusted. Engineers, as we speak, engineers from the army and the Delhi government are still working on these gates. And then the Navy had to be called out, and the divers had to go inside the dirty waters of Yamuna river to clean the silt. In fact, they dug up to 10 feet underneath these sluice gates to free up the sluice gates, and that's when these could be opened. So as we speak now, these gates are opened. As these gates were opened, that helped the water go away, and that's how floods in Delhi have receded as dramatically as they had risen. At the other side of the river, not far from this ITO barrage, at the other side of the river, that is the WHO area. Now in that area, there is another drain coming in from the city to empty the city's drained water. After all, the city gets all these rain. Where does the water go? That water goes into various drains which empty into the Yamuna. Those drains, as they empty into the Yamuna, they also have doors. So those doors regulate the water from the city going into the river. And when the river's in flood, Those doors are then lowered, those gates are then lowered so that the river's backflow cannot come into the city. Now the flow coming in from the city and then the rising levels of the Yamuna, they damaged that gate as well. So as that regulator got damaged, that regulator at the mouth of this drain emptying into the Yamuna, as that regulator also got damaged, backflow from the Yamuna even became heavier. I told you that already more water had accumulated than you might have imagined, even in a flood like this, because these 5 gates were jammed. These could not be lifted. And now, at the other end, on the other bank, because this regulator broke down, this gate broke down, river is very mighty. It had a lot more water. That little drain from the city simply had no chance against it. So the water from the river flowed back into the city. And that caused the flooding in that Mathura Road ITO area. And those were mostly the pictures you've seen. Now, you will ask me a good question. And that question is, who the hell was responsible for managing this barrage? I told you that first barrage, Delhi government, Wazirabad, third barrage, UP government, but the middle barrage, Haryana government. So why did Haryana government have the responsibility of managing this barrage? And most of us would not have figured this mess in Delhi, this confusion, this dog's breakfast in Delhi, but for the fact that the Kejriwal government immediately blamed Haryana government. And they said they've not been managing this barrage. And immediately the question was, why should Haryana government be managing a barrage in Delhi? And that we found out that the 3 barrages on the Yamuna in Delhi are managed by 3 different state governments, only one by Delhi. Now, the reason for this barrage being managed by Haryana government is that this barrage was built in the mid-60s. The first barrage, Wazirabad, was built in 1959. This barrage was built in mid-1960s. This was built because Delhi was then building the Indraprasth power plant, Indraprasth thermal power plant. You can still see the outlines of it if you stand on the ramparts of the Red Fort, or even if you drive around that little new bypass that they've built behind Rajghat. You can see the Indraprasth power plants. These are just shells now. Indraprasth power plant and Rajghat power plant. These were the big polluting power plants of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, until these were shut down by environmental authorities, and for good reason. In fact, for many years, I worked in the same building, in the Express building, where our exhausts used to suck in so much of fly ash from these plants that our AC ducts had all been blocked. We had blocked them all with newspapers because we did not want any of that air. Finally, these were shut down. Now, because there were these plants and Punjab government had a stake there, and Punjab government also got power from these plants. So Punjab government had a stake in the company that ran these plants, that is Indraprasth Power Generation Company Limited, or IPGCL. They agreed to build this barrage on the Yamuna, the ITO barrage on the Yamuna. The idea was that this will provide water for the cooling towers of these thermal plants. Mid-1960s, 1966, Punjab split into Punjab and Haryana. Haryana then became the inheritor state of IPGCL, of this barrage. So Haryana then in 1966, sort of vicariously or maybe by inheritance or by legacy, got the ownership of this barrage. It is just so everybody had forgotten about it. Till 2019, the company IPGCL, public sector company, was still paying for the upkeep of this barrage. But you know, this company had shut down almost 15-20 years ago. They were producing no power, thankfully. So at least our lungs, whatever damage may have been caused earlier, at least for the past 10-15 years, that's not been happening. But it's a PSU. They are as good as bankrupt. Or why should they waste their money? Because they are not running their plants. So they stopped paying for the upkeep of this barrage. They stopped paying and everybody forgot that there was a barrage. Now you have blames and counter blames. Delhi government is saying Haryana government didn't bother. They should have been managing this. Haryana government is saying we've been telling Delhi government to take over, but Delhi government has not responded. In any case, they never reminded us. Okay. Delhi government is saying, no, we wrote so many letters, Haryana government didn't bother. Officers around the Delhi Lieutenant Governor's office, you know the warfare that's going on between the central government and the Delhi AAP government. They are now telling anybody that, look, for 2 years, the Apex Committee in Delhi, which looks at the flood situation, has not even met. The end result is that none of the things that should have been done. We know that climate change is a fact. We know that extreme weather events do take place all the time. We also know that Delhi has had floods in the past. We also know, and somebody should have also remembered institutionally, that Delhi has 3 barrages that regulate the flow of the Yamuna water. So just a routine thing every year, maintenance. Even if you have a shop that you may not be using it for a long time, or a garage in a home that you haven't used for a long time, after a while you open the shutters and then you pull them down just to make sure the shutters don't get flooded. But if you don't do that for years, how much of an effort it will be to open a shop that's been shut, where shutters have been shut for 3, 4, 5 years, or a garage where the shutter has not been rolled up or down for 3, 4, 5 years. It then becomes quite a challenge to open it. That is precisely what happened with this particular barrage in this case. Now, it is not anybody's case that this is the only reason this flood took place, but this is definitely a reason why this flood became much, much worse, and why areas of Delhi which had never got flooded in the big floods of the past also got flooded this time. Hathnikund Barrage was built in 1999 as a successor to the old Tajewala Barrage, completed by the British in 1873. And that barrage had become very, very weak. There had been a year when the barrage had got filled up and looked like it will collapse any time. After that, a new barrage was built. That was Hathnikund. Now, regrettably, while Modi government, particularly Nitin Gadkari, when he was working in these areas, he talked about building more barrages upstream on the Yamuna. But unfortunately, that has not happened, because if that had happened, then north of India, particularly the cities of northern India, which are located on the Yamuna river, they would have been saved from the flood damage. But also, if water had been detained there in proper reservoirs, it could have been used for drinking water needs, for irrigation, and also for providing a continuous 12-month flow of water through the river. That obviously didn't happen. And one more factoid before I go ahead, that is that this river, the importance of this river for this region and for Delhi was noted very far back. So it was in 1335 that Firoz Shah Tughlaq, he dug what the precursor of the Western Yamuna Canal, what you see as the Western Yamuna Canal. Later it got silted, etc., etc. In British times, when Tajewala Headworks was built, this canal was revived.